Babies, bathwater, and Bibles. In these videos, I've made no secret of the fact that I don't believe in God. I used to be a practicing Christian. Indeed, I used to be an Anglican minister. I stepped onto that path because of a number of experiences that I would broadly describe as mystical. I don't believe any longer that these experiences point to any supernatural entity. They're a very important part of our human nature, akin to things like our appreciation of beauty, poetry, music, and other equally useless things. But they have nothing to do with religion per se, although perhaps they make what we term religion and religious experiences possible. Having made that clear, I want to emphasize that this does not mean that I reject everything in the Christian tradition as pointless or harmful. This is true of other religious systems too. Consider the Bible, which is obviously the religious text with which I'm most familiar. People who reject the teachings of the Bible completely or regard them as totally irrelevant for today are essentially committing the same error as biblical fundamentalists. They're failing to understand the text of the Bible within its cultural and historical context. The writings that we now call the Bible were written over a period of some 2,000 years, and many of these stories started out as oral traditions. Earlier writings have undergone various revisions at various times, and different writers and revisers had different motives at the time as well. As with any text, they reflect the values, beliefs, and circumstances of the day. There are some biblical teachings that we rightly reject today, perhaps many of them. There are others that retain some value when they're properly understood. The Bible, both the Old and New Testament, is not easy to understand, and we're foolish if we think we can simply sit down and read it without any historical and cultural background. Some things we'll get, many, if not most, we simply won't. The danger is, though, that we think we do. Whether we like it or not, the Bible requires careful historical and literary study in order to fully understand it. The same is surely true of any historical text, whether religious or not, written long ago in one or several ancient languages. Again, we're simply foolish if we don't see this. I would be equally foolish to reject some genuine wisdom simply because of a prior prejudice against the Bible. It contains human experience and reflection upon that experience, much of which remains relevant, but much of which no longer is. It records and interprets an important part of human history, and in many cases, it's the only source we have for that history. And we'd be foolish to ignore it completely and dismiss it all as nonsense. Of course, we now know and understand things that the authors at the time did not know. And of course, it reflects many values and beliefs that we no longer share. And of course, there are errors of fact and history. And finally, obviously, there are inconsistencies. It reflects a long period of history and the ideas that many people in many different times, and indeed from many different cultures, places, and situations. Properly understood, the Bible can be a source of wisdom, as can be the writings of Plato, or the Quran, or the Bhagavad Gita, the teachings of Confucius, or the unwritten traditions of indigenous peoples. We can learn from all of this if we open ourselves up to it, but we need to understand it. And we have to admit, this usually requires the guidance of scholars. Now, of course, the interpretation of the Bible as somehow divinely inspired, or even worse, dictated verbatim by God, obscures its true value for us today. It alienates people. As a result, the baby is thrown out with the bathwater. People simply refuse to so much as look at the Bible, and because of this, they're rejecting it in total ignorance of its actual contents. This kind of willful ignorance is no better than the fundamentalism that is its opposite. Know your enemy and know yourself, echoes another voice from the 6th century BCE, namely that of Sun Tzu. And remember, even when the Bible gets it wrong, this can still provide us with a useful starting point for thought, discussion, and debate.